Okay, I wanted to take just a few minutes of your time and kind of do a little video here and kind of explain the production process for creating a character. I find that some of the young artists kind of have a different understanding or not a complete understanding of how to create a character, and so I'm going to take you through the process that I've used it for my students. Okay, so we're going to take you through a piece created by Jeremiah Bigley, J.J. Bigley, and we're just going to take you through. This is his thread on the Media Arts and Animation website where he's documented his process of creating this character. So one of the first things I have them do is they have to post up some concepts. I require them to give me 10 concepts of different characters, and so they get a choice of what they want to do. And so these are some of the ones that JJ had put up. Okay. And once they give me 10 concepts, then I'll go through there. If I like all 10 concepts, I'll tell them, okay, I like all 10. You choose. If they give me 10 and I don't like any of them, then they have to go back and do it again. And I have various things that I look at when I'm trying to find what I want to prove for them to build. And so once they've posted these, then they can narrow it down to which ones they want to pursue. And then what they do is go and contact the artist, and that's what's you can see right here where JJ said this has been approved. And so he has written an email to the person, the conceptual artist, and then that artist has written an email back and approved that he could use this. And that is the step that I have all of my students in my classes at the Art Studio Dallas that I want you to work from an existing piece of concept art, not work from your own design. I have students all the time that want to work from their own designs. The thing about it is I teach my classes like it is in the industry. And in the industry, you're not going to be working from your own designs. You'll be working somewhere as a modeler if you're going to be a modeler, and somebody else will be the conceptual artist, and then you have to interpret their art. So this is the piece that JJ eventually goes with, and so that's what we're going to do, show you how he built this. Okay. All right, so one of the first things that you do is you go out and get reference. And so JJ started, since this was kind of a little rat character, he went out and get all kinds of reference on, and I don't care if it's illustration reference, photographic reference, he's gathering all kinds of reference to help him in the creation of his model. Now, another thing that confuses people a little bit is the idea of needing some form of a model sheet, okay? My students don't model from model sheets, and really good modelers don't need model sheets to model from. They just model from the actual concept art. Now, JJ's modeling is going to be modeling in 3D Max and ZBrush, and so in this case, he's starting here with some Z-spheres to get his initial blocking mesh. Now, you can use 3D Max, you can use Maya, it doesn't matter what the 3D software you use. And as far as your sculpting software, your digital sculpting, most people use ZBrush or Mudbox. And in this case, he happens to be using ZBrush, which has Z-spheres, which something like Mudbox doesn't have. And he's using this as an initial way to get his his initial base blocking mesh that he's going to build from, his base mesh. And in this case, this is what he has, okay? And of course, then he discovered that once he kicked that mesh out, that really he had to take it back into Max and redo the topology of it, because when you're doing those Z-spheres in there, you don't have total control over the topology. With the current version of ZBrush, you have a little bit more control, but with the version he was doing, and this was back in 2009, he didn't have as much control. So this is the mesh that was kicked out of ZBrush, and then he brought it back into Max, and you can see he's indicating here where he's going to put some more cross sections in here to kind of control the mesh. Okay, so then he brought it back into ZBrush, and he's starting to do a sculpt. So he's taking that mesh after he put his loops in there, and he's starting to do a sculpt, and this is what he's giving. Now, one of the things I approached him about this point is I didn't think that, he should be building this character in this stance, that he needed to have the character in a little bit more of a neutral stance, okay? Another thing that he discovered is in his initial blocking mesh that he had not put in an ear. And once he started pulling the ear out, which you can do in Mudbox or ZBrush, pull the geometry out, but as he was keep subdividing it, he couldn't get enough detail in the ear. So he decided to go ahead and kick the character back out at that state, and then add the ears back in Max, and then bring it back in. And then at that point, he also determined, which is what I told him and some other people had told him, is that he needed to create the character in more of a relaxed kind of T-pose. And so this is what he ended up once he reworked it, and this is the pose that he's going to be sculpting in. Okay. All right, so once he had that, he also gathered some other reference. Here's some other reference of some little rat characters that he found that he thought would be a good reference to look at. And so he kind of brought those in there as well, which was great. Always doing some research. Okay, so here he is starting to sculpt the model out. So he's taken that base mesh out of Max, brought it into ZBrush, and now he's doing his sculpting, trying to start getting his muscle structures in. Okay, so legs are not just, tubes. They're actual muscle structures and knees and bones and tendons. Okay. And then here he is where he's starting to work on the rib cage. This was a piece of reference that he had. And so he's starting to get detail into the rib cage area. And then here's an update. Okay. Starting to look pretty good. Of course, he hadn't really worked on the hands and arms or the feet yet, but it's starting to take a shape. Here he is a little bit further along. And getting a little bit closer up. See a nice little detail that he's building in here, getting his muscle structures, get some nice abs in there. A little bit further along. And now he's starting to sculpt on the arms. Okay, starting to get his muscle structure in here. So you have to use a lot of reference of real arms as well as understanding muscle structures, what muscles come from where. So it's a lot of anatomy, and that's one of where a lot of people kind of fall down when they're doing character modeling is they think they don't need to know anything about anatomy. Well, that's what really brings a character to life is it's all based on real anatomy. Okay, and so now he's starting to work on the hands, starting to get his the tendons in here, getting the muscle structure. Okay, starting to get the fingers fleshed out, fingernails put in there. And then here's the final hands once he's got them all sculpted in there. Getting all your wrinkles and their veins in there. Pretty nice. Okay, so now he's going to work on the head. Okay, so he's put a little Z-sphere in here for an eyeball, so he has something to put in there to work with. Starting to get his teeth blocked in, getting ready to mask out where he's going to be pulling the teeth in here. So here's where he's initially starting to pull those out. And now he's starting to get them more molded into something that's more appropriate. Along the lines of what canine teeth, I think, is what he's really looking at there. And then you can start seeing here's really nice where he's starting to get those and he's getting the gums kind of puckered up around them. Nice, really detail. Starting to really come along. Okay, now he's starting to get more detail in the face. You can see he's putting little pores in here for his whiskers that he'll put in later. A little close-up of that. So you're starting to get the veins in the ears. There's a close-up of it down here. Really getting those teeth worked in really well. Starting to get a little bit of pucker on the lip. Now he's coming back in and he's getting a little bit of an eyelid in there. I'll go back. You'll see he didn't have an eyelid in the one prior to this. Now he's got his eyelid in there. Starting to get some scars and such. You'll see some little cracks in the teeth, so he's making it a little more aged for the character. Been through a few battles. Okay, so now he's starting to get the feet blocked in. He's worked on the tail something here. And now he's starting to work on the feet. Okay. Getting the initial shape. Now he's starting to get more detail. He's going to treat this inside toe more like a thumb. Okay, has more of a thumb look, which is what the reference he was going from. And so here are the other feet looking pretty good. Getting this detail in there. And then the final feet, once he's kind of extended his claws out as weapons. Getting the pads in there really nice. A few wrinkles. Stretching of the skin. It's very nice. Okay. All right. Now, at this point, what he's noticed is that the geometry, because he had pushed and pulled and shoved and stretched on the geometry, that the geometry was getting a little funky and need to be retopologized. Okay, that happens a lot once you're creating and pushing and stretching your original base mesh so much. You're distorting the geometry and the flow of the geometry so much. You get to a certain point where you want to retopologize the piece so that we can control that. So here he's kicked the piece back out into Max, and he's using Max's graphite tools to come back on. Basically, the way this graphite tools works, it's got a lot of functionality, but what he's using right here is to be able to sculpt on a surface. So it basically turns the surface into like it's a magnet, and as you're drawing, it sticks to the surface. And so he's plotting out his quads of where he wants the quads to flow on this. And so here he is getting it blocked back out. So he's doing like a low poly version of this, still in quads, that then will be brought back in, and then he's going to project his sculpt back on it, and that will allow him to control the flow of the polys again because they're getting distorted in his mesh. Okay, you can see here getting the back built in, the chest built in. Okay, here he is starting to get the arms put in there. Okay, and I had a student asking me this the other day and didn't quite understand this. Here is a pole. Here's a good example of a pole right here. It's a 5-star pole. What this is when you're building with quads, and under normal circumstances, you have 4 quads that meet together at a point. That's normal. But every once in a while, because you're doing loops and one loop may need to cross another loop, you're going to have a point where a pole, and that's where 4 quads meet together. Okay, and it forms a pole. We don't want poles, but they're just necessary sometimes. So here he is getting a little bit further along, getting nice topology flow. Okay, this is what a nice base mesh should start with. And then he stopped before he finished to do a little test. Okay, and here's a good example of this. This one on the right is his original sculpt that he's got in ZBrush right now. And this section of it right here, it has 4 million polygons on this section. So he brought this in and he retopologized it and then brought it back into ZBrush and then subdivided and then projected this detail onto this mesh. And now this mesh has 1.3 million polys. And so he went from 4 million polys to 1.3 million polys, and it's got the exact same detail. And that's one of the purposes of doing a retopology, is being able to control the flow of the topology as well as control the amount of subdivisions you need to pull off the detail that you need. Okay, so here's the final rebuild of the character that then he's going to bring back into ZBrush and reproject onto, and that's what he did. Okay, then he's going in here showing some of his processes. I have my students show a lot of process and show how they do things so that people can kind of see how things were done, and he's showing how to use those graphite tools to use them to retopologize things. Okay. Here's a little animated GIF that he made, which basically shows, you start and then you're just dragging edges or putting points out there, and it's creating new polys, and it sticks to the surface of the original one, so you can pretty fast retopologize. Okay, so now he's got it back in there, and he's reprojected it, and now he's working back on it. So now he's starting to work on the hair. Okay, so he's starting to get refinement with the hair in there, and that's just texture on there. It's just how he's using a textural brush on there. So smooth in some areas. He's starting to, block in and get his whiskers put in. Here's a little bit close up of the detail. As a matter of fact, let's click on this so we get a little bit closer to it. So you can see he's getting the flow of the fur on there. So he's not using some kind of a fur plug-in, because eventually what JJ is going to be doing with this is it's going to go inside of a game engine. Okay, so the next thing he wanted to do is on his concept, he's got some bands, some little bands that go around and dig into the character's face. So he's kicked this back out into Max, and he's drawn these bands in here. Then he took them back in, and here you can see he's got the bands lined up to the low poly version of the character into ZBrush. And now what he's done is he come in here and done some masking. So all the dark area is where the character's mask, and the light area is what's alive. And then he's able to go in here and start painting on this, sculpting on this, and pushing it in, because he's going to have that ribbon that wraps around here, this strap, and it's going to dig into the surface. He wants to get that puckering around there. Okay, so here it is. Let's get closer. Okay, and so now what he's doing is mask the inside, and he's working on the outside, and he's pulling it out. So he's puckering it a little bit, and that's how he's able to get these kind of, he's pulled the geometry out enough that he's starting to get this puckering look around those straps. Okay, and that's what he was trying to garner in what he was doing. So here's the sculpt once he got finished with it. So you can see he's kind of rounded all that. And then this is a good shot because this shows with the strap on there and then without it. And then the same thing here with the strap and without it there. Okay, so there's the character, and he's changed the settings a little bit. This was his original sculpt, and then what he actually did was he had to work on another project for me, and so he kind of set it aside. And then he went back in and reworked it a little bit. And this is a little nice animated GIF that he put in there with the old and then the new. Old and then the new. Okay. See how he's added a little bit more trimming in here. He's really worked the muscle structures a little bit better on the legs. Okay. I liked how he dropped the feet a little bit further down like so, which makes it a little bit easier for boning. Okay, then he's ready to start working on the clothing. So he kicked out the character, the final character, at its lowest setting in ZBrush and brought it back into Max, which here's the base mesh that he's working from. And then what he did is he highlighted this area, and then he cloned this to make the pants. Okay, once he had it cloned, then he reworked the geometry. So this is the copy of this, but you'll see he came in and added some extra edge loops in here to get what he wanted when he's going to start adding detail into the pants here. So then he took that back into ZBrush and he subdivided it and he manipulated a little bit till he got exactly what he wanted. Okay, and then he kicked that back out and brought it into Max. Now the reason he brought it back into Max and he kicked it out is because he wanted to use some of Max's ability to do soft body dynamics to create folds. Okay, so he brought it into Max for that. And here is some of the generations he did. So what he's doing is using a soft body dynamics, which is treating this like cloth, and it's adding its own wrinkles into it based on the underlying geometry that he had it colliding with. And these are all different versions that he ran, little simulations that he ran, until he finally found the one he liked, which was this one. And it was a burlap setting in Max that gave him the material the way that he wanted it to be. So once he got that, then he brought it back into ZBrush, and then he was able to go back on with ZBrush sculpting tools and push it more into the direction that he wanted. Here's some of the armor that he started working. This was all done in Max. So, he had export parts of this is for the legs out, so that he had them as a guide in Max, and then he actually created the hard body pieces in Max, which are much easier to create than in Mudbox, or ZBrush rather. Okay, so here's where he's working on the arms and putting these straps in here. Okay, and this was generated in a similar fashion as to the pants. Okay, and then he sculpted the ribbons in there. And then same thing on the legs. So here's where he's just now starting. You can see it was a base kind of tube look, and then he's coming in and starting to paint and sculpt those straps in there for the legs. And there's the final look for the legs. Nice look. And a final look of what the character looked like at that stage once he got some of his armor put in there, got the straps put in there. Let's click on that, make it larger. You can see it a little bit better here. Okay, very nice. Okay, and then the next stage is doing retopology. So for a lot of people, if you're not doing gaming, then at this stage right here, then you would extract maps out of this in ZBrush or Mudbox to be brought back into Max. Now, this confuses people a lot bit because they think that, okay, once you've got this, then you just kick this out and bring it to Max and you're done. No, this thing is 4 or 5 million polys, and there's no way this can be animated. So what's happening here is you're generating the high-end mesh, and then you're going to use projections to project this back onto a lower poly mesh. So what he will do, if you were doing this for like a cinematic, then he would kick this back out of Mudbox or ZBrush at a lower setting, maybe 1 or 2 subdivisions, and then he's going to extract maps off of this. He can extract displacement maps, normal maps, ambient occlusion maps, and as well as, color maps, which he hasn't done that yet, to project to bring back into Max or Maya for posing and such. But in his particular case, he's actually going to go into the gaming industry. So his next step was to take that model in and then topologize it down to get it down as small as possible, okay? Which will end up being, there won't be quads anymore. He'll continue working this until he gets it down to being all triangles. And so this is where he is decimating, there's a term, he's decimating it down into triangles to get as little geometry as possible. I mean, this confuses people a little bit sometimes because all geometry is triangles. Even these quads are triangles. They just have a hidden edge. We can't see it in there. Well, once you get into the game engine, everything is dumped down to triangles. And so there's ways to actually come in here and to cut down the amount of geometry by using triangles instead of quads. And that's what he's doing in here. And so you can see where he's coming back in and working some areas to get less amount of geometry in there, but still hold the shape. Okay, and of course, we're going to have the character posed, and you want some kind of a tool with it. In his case, he was going to do a couple of weapons in here. So here's the low poly weapons that he's created. And then he's coming back in here, and I know this is kind of hard to tell, but this is us looking at the back of the character. So his head is right here, and this is his arm, and this is going to be a shield that's on the back of the character, okay? So this is like some armor on the back of his neck, protecting his neck, and then a shield back here, and then with his weapons back there. Okay, so here's where he's taken the leg back down and taken some of the areas and try to keep his silhouette good, but able to get the geometry down by taking some of the areas and taking them down into triangles. And here is the final of the pants once he's got it all down as low poly as he can get. Okay. And these pants, I think he says, came in at right under at 1,600 polys, a little under 1,600 polys for the pants. Okay, so here he is starting to retopologize the head, okay, getting it down into triangles, okay, so he can get some of the geometry out of there. Okay, at this point, this one's about 85% done. Here's a shot of the body now that he's got it down into triangles. Okay, this confuses people because, once we're putting it in the game, we're not subdividing anymore, so we don't care whether it's quads. We don't want it quads. It's going to be triangles, and that's what we're doing. Okay, now, at that point, once he get it finished, then he has to unwrap it. Okay, so here he is unwrapped this to get his character wrapped out. Okay, and that was his first unwrap. And then here he is starting to paint on the character. First stages. Now this is where we were kind of experimenting and playing with subsurface scattering, and that's a technique where you can have it make so like something like an ear is thin and light will pass through it, which is really not going to survive in a game, but he wanted to experiment with anyway, and so that was kind of nice. Here he is working on the hands, getting the hands painted in there. Now, I see a lot of students, they're doing painting for me of skin and stuff, and they just flood it with the color. I mean, skin is not a solid color. It's lots of colors merged in together, and it takes a while to do that, okay? Purples and greens. Okay, and so here is the character where he's got his initial base colors on it, okay? Some of the details starting to paint in, starting to come along. And then he ended up going with a 2048 by a 4096 bitmap to put on there. Now, a lot of people think that bitmaps always have to be square to put on a character. They don't have to be square. As a matter of fact, this could have been done as to two 2048s, but it's in a game engine, you have what's called a call, which is, when it has to load it into RAM, and the more calls, the slower the game is. So it would actually slow the game down if he had this as two 2048s versus one 2048 by 4096. So that's how he ended up laying it out. Okay, so here he is starting to get his blocked in his colors for his diffuse. It's not finished yet. There's his normal map. This is where he generated from the high poly sculpt to the low poly. And then this is an occlusion map. Okay. That specific one that was referred to as a cavity map is the little areas of little bitty detail. Okay. And then he ended up generating 3 ambient occlusion maps. These are all maps going to be used in the texturing process. This is where he was generating some masks to be used in Photoshop to texture with. Now, this was an interesting one because JJ and I were having a conversation, and a lot of the people, the students, when they're first working, they keep taking their characters into Marmoset to kind of look at them. Marmoset is not a game engine, but it's a utility that students use to kind of check their models out, what it will be like in a real game engine. And what I'd always noticed about Marmoset was that its speculars are really hot. So in other words, once somebody did the speculars that looked like they were right for Marmoset, when you took it into something else, they were way too hot. So JJ did a nice thing where he took his character into Marmoset and shows it. Then he did a three-point shader. That's a custom shader for Max, which will give you a game look inside of Max's viewport. And then he took it into the Unreal Engine, UDK. Now, this would have been Unreal 3, not the current Unreal 4. Now, nowadays, these would have looked a little bit different because you're using PBRs, physical-based rendering, and so you'll be able to calculate reflection in here. He's not really calculating much reflection in here. But anyway, this was a nice thing to do to kind of show people that he understands the difference between it looking different in different packages. Okay, so he wants to pose it, so he's brought it back into Max here, and he's come in and he started putting his bone system in it. Then he took that, and then he's starting to put controls on the bones. And then here it is with the base pose on it. So here's his first pose, and you can see now with the bone system what it looked like. Okay, then he started getting some feedback from other people on that final pose, and so he did another pose where he played with different poses in here. So this is a nice little animated GIF that he stuck in here showing the different poses that he played with until he finally got the final pose that he was happy with. It's not always just from one thing to the other. You have to experiment with different things to finally get the piece that you want. Okay, then he started working on the base. Okay, so on the base, initial sculpt, and he's decimating it. Here's the final high poly sculpt of the base. Skull, it's a warrior, killed some other, people, bones. Want some kind of a creative base. Here he is. He's taking it in and decimating it. Okay, so he can get the poly count down low. And then here's what it looks like once he's got it decimated. And then this is the final look. There's the final decimated. Here's what it looks like once it's actually rendered with the normals projected on here and AO projected on get the final look that he wants. Okay, here's his unwrap. There's his diffuse, his normal map, and then his AO. Here he is in Max. He's actually generating this is going to be a little tuft of hair, a little goatee that the character has. He's using Max's hair system to generate this. Then he's coming in and he's placing it on planes in here to put it underneath. He's going to project those onto. And then here he is. He's got it pretty much ready to go. And there it is with its normal maps, low poly character normal maps. And he's ready to start doing his lighting and such. Okay, so here he is starting with his lighting. Okay, so he's got the character with its textures in here, and now he's playing with different kind of lighting, how he wants to light this to show the piece off. Okay, so this is the first kind of stage of that. This was an interesting piece that I wanted to show you that he kind of put in here where he was, once he was starting to get his texturing done on the shield, he wanted to put a little bit of a patina on here because it was supposed to be done out of copper. And he's using an inner glow filter inside of Photoshop with a noise in it to get that kind of a look. And it was kind of a neat kind of look. Okay, so here is his final diffuse map. Okay, so now you can see all the detail he's put in there with the teeth, the hands, the pants in here, all the fur. There's his leather that's for his armor, the patina on, the shield on the back, and he's got his, looks like he's not, on this particular one, it's like he's not quite finished with the blade in here. So it's almost finished. And here he is playing with the lighting a little bit more. Here's his base. Now that he's got, he's playing with a little bit of a volumetric light in here. He's come back in and added some grass on his base. A little more detail in there. And then here is his final look. Okay, he's put a little bit of a graphic in the background. Got the light coming in here, the little volumetric light. And if you, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there's little bitty dust particles that he has floating out in there. It's a really nice look. Okay, and then for his website, it's going to have the character displayed a bunch of different ways like this. Here is an ortho view. Showing a front view, side view, back view. Okay, so let's go over to JJ's actual website. And here's his website, and we'll see the character, what he's put on his website of the characters. Now, he did a really nice thing in here where he's showing, down here in the bottom left, how many triangles and what size bitmap that he's using in here, given information. But he also put a wireframe rollover. So when you put your mouse over here, a wireframe shows you the actual structure, and that's really good because people in the industry want to see your wireframes. They want to see how the flow and how efficient you are with your structure. And so these are really nice the way he kind of did this, where you can see the piece, but then you can see a structure underneath it for a low poly character, how efficient he is in his polygon structure. It's very nice. Showing both sides of the character. We want to see, front, back, sides. Then here he is just showing it without the graphics on there, showing this lighting, or here it is just with regular lighting without the volumetric. Okay. Has all his maps in here. So here's his diffuse. He shows that. If you go to normal, it shows his normal map, his specular map. This determines how shiny something is with the gloss map. Okay. Shows his the hair, and he shows the same thing with it, how he's using it on there. Shows the base. Base is a kind of a character in itself. So he goes and shows it in here. Same thing with the normal and a specular in here. And then he shows some of his work product, along the way. And so these are nice for people to see, how you ended up with what you did. Instead of just seeing it pose, showing everybody, I did it in a relaxed T-pose. Okay, shows the original concept, shows some of his reference, shows his stages in here. This shows a little bit of the process, which tells people a little bit more about you as an artist than a final piece does. Okay, it kind of shows you how you did the work that you did, which is kind of what I'm doing in this video, is showing you that. And so these are a lot of the things that you would see in his thread. Okay, showing where he did his lighting. Okay, it's all great stuff. Now, he did include a couple of 360 turnarounds on his website. That's what these two right here. These are 360 turnarounds, and so I've got them here. Now, back in the day, 100 years ago, the way we do it is render, 300 frame turnaround. We don't do that anymore. What we do now is what we call scrubs. Okay. This is a scrub so that you take it. This is not really made to be played in here. Okay. It's made for you to scrub through this so you can capture it at any angle. So we're using a PNG to kick these out, which is the highest quality that you can get. And then it's done with 32 frames for the rotation. Okay. And we'd only do 31 of the 32 because 0 and 32 are the same frame, so I only use 31 of those. And here it is with that volumetric in there. And then he also kicked out another one right here that shows the turntable without the volumetric, so you can just see the character a little bit more without just the mood in there. And these are really good for people to be able to kind of look and get dimensionality to see your character. They make sure when you animate these, you don't do a slow in and slow out, which is what the default, and that's a mistake a lot of people make. And then this is really nice for people to be able to come in here and interactively kind of look at your character. So anyway, that's the process. You start with a base mesh. Then once you have the base mesh, the main thing about the base mesh is that it captures the essence of the character. There's two things about a base mesh. It has to capture the essence of the character, and you want all your polygons to be squares, and you want them all to be the same size. Now, that can't actually happen, so some of your polygons may have to be a little rectangular, and some of them a little bit smaller than other ones, like at the toes would have to be smaller than on the thigh. But that's the goal, is you want really even topology, because you're going to be taking it into a sculpting software that you're going to be subdividing it, and you want to keep about the same amount of detail everywhere, okay? So, and then once you have that, you take it into ZBrush or Mudbox, then you do your sculpting. At a certain point, you're probably going to want to retopologize it, so you will kick it back out and retopologize it. Nowadays, Mudbox and ZBrush has some very good retopology tools inside of them. You could do a retopology directly inside of Mudbox or ZBrush. You might want to kick it back into Max or Maya and tweak it a little bit, then bring it back in, and then you're going to project all that detail that you did back onto that mesh, which will then allow you to lower the amount of polygons on it and keep the detail, plus straighten up some of the distortion that might be happening as you're pulling on it, and then finish the sculpt. And then when you get finished, then you will kick out a medium topology version back into Max or Maya, and then kick out maps that will add all that detail back into Max or Maya to get the final look in there. You're not kicking out the final model back into Max or Maya. You're kicking out a low version of it, maybe a 30, 40,000 polygon, 50,000 polygon version of it out, and then using maps to project all that detail back in. Now, and then if you're somebody that's going into the gaming industry, then you will kick out another version. You will take that low-end version and you will retopologize that back into triangles, and that would be the one that you would have on your reel, and of course you would show all that process on your reel. Now hopefully this has given you guys a little bit more of an understanding of what the process is from beginning to end of creating a character, because I can tell some people are a little bit confused over what they're doing. They kind of think that, oh, we just kind of sculpt a character in Max and then we paint it and we're done. Nobody, that's not a current workflow, not if you're doing high quality pieces. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.